Hey YouTube, let's talk about one of the major problems with preparedness right now within the entire genre. And it depends on how you want to define it. That's one of the problems as well, is people just don't know what it even really means to be prepared. They think that just having some camping skills, which are very vital, but they think just camping skills or having the ability to hunt or fish, that's going to be the end-all be-all, and that they don't really need anything else. And I think that there's a lot of other skills, a lot of techniques, there's a lot of bits of wisdom and knowledge that goes into this. And it really is more of a lifestyle than people really even admit that it is. The thing about also putting back provisions is something that a lot of people need to do much more of. I have a lot of friends and family that say that they're prepared, but they're really not well-rounded. They might have a lot of one thing, but they are lacking in so many other areas. But the biggest problem is that people, in my opinion, oversimplify the process. And I'm not trying to say, hey, let's make things complicated. But I am here to tell you that things really are not as simple as just having a few gallons of water put back, a few buckets of food, knowing how to make a campfire, knowing how to put up a tent, knowing how to, regulate your body temperature. Those are all good things, but it's much more than that. And it's very problematic to see a lot of people, and it typically are people who've only been into preparedness for a few years. But it's kind of sad, and it's a little bit, of one of these things that you kind of just hope for the best. But when you see people purposely put the whole lifestyle in this little box, and they say that's it. And then you have some people that identify with different terms, and then they confuse things. Whatever you identify with, that's fine, as long as you're really prepared. There's a lot of people who say, oh, I'm not a prepper, I'm a survivalist, or I'm into survival bushcraft, or I'm into pioneering art, or I'm into very pure homesteading. And there's all these terms. In fact, there's all kinds of new terms coming out all the time. And I don't even keep up with it anymore. Just like there's so much gear that comes out. Most of it is no good. And they call, they put all these terms and they call it things like survival this and survival that. And, you're lucky if you can find maybe one out of 100 items that come out that are actually worth your time and your money. And so you have to be very vigilant with your resources. And once again, what you do with your time, because it's so valuable and precious and limited. It's one of the things that are so finite that it's always fleeting, It's just like when you're at home and it's dark out and you want to be able to read. Well, you're going to need a light source, And no matter what you use, you're going to be expending some type of resource. If you have a headlamp, or if you're actually using the lights that are, built into your house, you're using electricity. If you're using candles, if you're using a lantern, if you're using a fireplace for light, everything uses some type of resource. And that's the problem with a lot of people, that they think that resources out there are unlimited. And I want to believe that we have potential, as a species, to tap into a lot of resources, and we do to some degree. But to say that in certain environments that there's unlimited food, there's unlimited trees, and in some environments there's just very limited of certain things. And unless you have some things put back or alternatives to those, you're going to be lacking greatly. And so I just needed to say that, and to kind of round this off, that on the flip side, instead of just talking about material assets, material goods and resources, the aspect of prepping that really gets ignored as well is the whole mental game. It's a head job, a lot of people call it, because it's mental. It's mental in the fact that when you're really under stress, you act differently, you think differently, you do all kinds of things differently. So are you aware of how you act under stress? like really stressed out? Have you been in that situation? Have you tried to work through it? What was the results? And how much awareness did you have or did you retain of your environment? A lot of people, when they get stressed out or they're under a bunch of, this and that, they have to do all this, right? There's a lot of priority, and they get kind of tunnel vision. They kind of lose focus of their surroundings, and being aware, being self-aware of your environment has to remain on some level. You don't want to let that diminish, not just for your safety and security of yourself and family, but in terms of just being able to identify other options to solve problems. Problem solving is probably the highlight of what makes a prepper so interesting, because that's what we do. We have planning stages that hopefully are developed in a high level before we actually need to use any of our resources. And being able to plan ahead and have strategies and techniques of how to overcome challenges is really what kind of a lot of us preppers are kind of like a specialist in. And so it's not, once again, just about material assets, even though we do need them and they are lacking in most people's inventories. But I have to say as well is that the planning stages, the means to work through problems, is not so impressive when you look at the population in general. So many people default to their phone as a solution, either to look up information or to call for help. I mean, if you look up the statistics of how many times 911 or whatever your emergency number is in your area is used, you would be shocked. It's an amazing number. And I looked it up in my area, and I just was like, that can't be true. And I felt sorry for the emergency phone operator. I was like, man, that's a stressful freaking job. And I hope that they have quite a few operators, because, that's a lot of volume, even for a rural area like that I have, and that I live in. And so many people are dependent on other people, other systems, government, for example. There's so much dependency, is what I'm saying, that unless you're aware of it, unless you actually put that into your equation of how to prepare if that's not available, if that infrastructure fails, if you don't plan on that being a possibility, then you will fail as a prepper. You will fail as a person, as a provider, especially if other people are dependent on you. So how can you, on any level, be dependent on anybody else if other people are dependent on you? Especially when there's a possibility that there may not be any infrastructure in certain situations, and that you have to rely on yourself and on your provisions, on your planning, on your skills, on your wisdom. You have to rely on your foundation, and you have to really know who you are. You have to know where you came from.